So we left off last week talking about leprosy, kind of the rules of leprosy in chapter number 13, Leviticus 13. And I mentioned how that leprosy, even though it was a physical ailment, very serious, took a long time for that ailment to eventually consume that person that was afflicted by it. Overall, very painful. It caused one, of course, according to the law, as he is given direction here in Leviticus 13, that you had to be separated from general society to if you have leprosy. So actually, leper colonies became a big thing because of the law. And so you had a group of people here who are now afflicted by that. And in the New Testament, this situation is sin. That it can get into the camp, and if it's not exercised, that is, if it's not quarantined, it can go through the camp. And that can be a very difficult thing. We talked a little bit about false doctrine last week, and there's some advantages and disadvantages to having a lot of congregations in a small area. In Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, Arkansas, especially North Alabama, they say you trip over one congregation and you land on three. Look, there is one county in Tennessee with 23 churches of Christ. 23. Now, not all of them now are faithful, but you know what? A lot of them are. A lot of them are still. So there's an advantage to that in that, you have a lot of brothers and sisters in Christ in your secular world too. The person that you go and who owns the corner store, corner restaurant, guess what? They're members of the church. You go buy a car, guess what? The salesman, he's a member of the church. The gas or electric man, guess what? They're members of the church. Your third grade teacher, your science teacher, guess what? They're members of the church. And so that there can be advantages of that. But there also can be disadvantages to that as well. And here's a big one, is that when false doctrine gets in one of those congregations, gets into one of those situations, it is so difficult to get that out. And you think, how did this dumb doctrine, and there are many dumb doctrines out there, I mean just foolish doctrines. How did this get traction at all? And now all of a sudden this false doctrine is going through the church. You see, we don't really we have to be on guard for that, but not near as much here as other places. We just don't come into contact with a whole lot of other congregations, you know what I mean? And so, that, in one sense, that's a good thing. We have a little bit of insulation in that particular situation. But it doesn't take but just a little bit of this, or a little bit of that, and it can go through the church and ruin, destroy congregations of the Lord's people. And you see big movements. You think back in the 70s and 80s, how many of you remember, and you gotta be, okay, it's not fair because as young as I am, you have to remember that I grew up in the church, not just in the church, but plugged in as far as, my dad being a preacher. So I'm a preacher's kid, right? So it's a little bit not fair. But how many of us remember the Boston movement? Anybody remember the boss? Hey, I was thinking you would. Okay, good, yeah. So.
I know, I'm old.
You're old. I knew you would. I knew you would.
I could have lied and said no.
Yeah, so the Boston movement, yeah, don't Google it. Just trust me, it was horrible. It was horrible. But that movement went through the church like wildfire. And a lot of these congregations, many of them wound up closing, and then some of them just decided, there's still congregations even to this day that are kind of associated with that movement. It hadn't 100% died out. But largely they've been segregated, which is a good thing, because they're nut jobs. But it's movements like that, it's false doctrines of which, I'm just not even going to put the seeds in your head about some of those things, that lay hold of the church and just do all kind of damage. And it's interesting that, leprosy and how God said, look, this is how you have to deal with leprosy. And you have to quarantine. That had never been done before in history. That had never been done. No culture, no civilization ever did that. And so when God says, okay, this is what you're going to do, I can imagine some of the expressions on folks' faces. What? He wants us to do what? Why? That doesn't even make any sense. Well, this is what God wants. Just do what he says to do. And ultimately, things are going to turn out very, very well for you if you obey him. So, leprosy was a very challenging, very difficult situation. We see in the body, the things that he says. We're not going to read all that. Of course, we did read a little bit of that last week. Then you go down to verse 29. He even talks about now when it's on the head or for men in the beard, the priest again, he's going to look at it. He's not going to touch it. He might go in the house, but he's not going to touch anything in the house. He's going to look at the afflicted individual. And then if the priest comes out and says, this person in this house has leprosy, from that moment forward, go down to verse 45, that person, if he or she has to go out and about, has to proclaim. Number 1, verse 44, if he's a leprous individual, he is unclean. There's no way for him to be clean. He is always unclean. And so what does that mean? If you are always unclean, what can, as a Jew, what could you not do if you are perpetually unclean? What could you not do?
Do the sacrifices.
No sacrifices. You could, there's no really worship at all. None of that.
Yeah, pretty much.
No ceremony.
No participation whatsoever.
No participation with your brothers and sisters. None of that. You can't do anything. And so there is now the difference is this, is that you're still if you're a leprous Jew, you're still a Jew. And because you couldn't participate in anything, it's not like, God said, you're a leper, so now, you're not participating in anything, I'm going to destroy you for your sin. That's not the case. You just are removed from society, so you can't participate. You still be saved, you still live righteously as a leper. But the idea is now, if you have sin on you, guess what you can't do? You can't participate in any spiritual thing. And by the way, if you hide your sin and you are participating, I mean, you know, people don't know that, but guess who does know that? I mean, God knows that, right? So, he knows, and he is the one who either listens or doesn't listen. He understands when someone is in sin, things like that. When,
Oh, once you got leprosy, what was the term of it? A year or 6 months, or how long would a man have leprosy before he is cured?
there was no cure for leprosy.
There was no.
In ancient days, matter of fact, leprosy wasn't able to be cured until the late 1800s. So it's only been within the last just a little over 100 years that there has been a cure for it. Up until that time, if you got leprosy, of course you got leprosy by touching someone who has it. If you got leprosy, that was a death sentence. Now, a death sentence, you could live, people have lived with leprosy for 30 years. But imagine that, 30 years without being able to touch another human being. You know, I mean, I don't know about you, but it's tough to go 5 minutes without touching another human being. You know what I mean? I mean, we hug each other, we high-five each other. I mean, that physical touch, that's important to us. Being in very close proximity, you know, I'm standing there at the back doors every Sunday, you're going by. Whether I shake your hand or hug you or not, you're right there, right? Well, guess what? Not with leprosy. That's not even a possibility to even be in the proximity of an individual. And so you are ostracized. I mean, yeah, that's a negative connotation. Quarantine, and as a matter of fact, that gets us back to, you know, verse 45 of Leviticus 13. The leper in whom the plague is, his clothes should be rent, his head bare. That's a shame, by the way. He shall put a covering on his upper lip and shall cry, unclean, unclean. So this person not only is removed from society, but if he has to go, you know, do whatever it is he might need to do in life, you know, to survive, to eat, things like that, he's got to warn other people, unclean, unclean, and shout it out. That's a terrible way to live, is it not? Terrible way. But that's what the disease of leprosy did. And that's how ugly sin is to God. And that, of course, it was the whole point that he's making. So the garment has to be torn. The person is ultimately is in great shame. And his, verse 46, all the days where the plague shall be in him, he shall be defiled. And for them, until, you know, in very rare situations, and until the Lord came and was healing people of their leprosy, we'll get to that in a minute. There was no cure, and so the vast majority, 99.99999% of people always had leprosy and died of their leprosy. And so ultimately it killed them. And so it said, okay, as long as you are a leper, all the days that the plague is in you, you shall be defiled, unclean, and he shall dwell alone. Without the camp shall his habitation be. Now, it came to be that, you know, there would be a few people with leprosy, and so they would have what's called leper colonies. So, but still, I mean, you're around other lepers. And so that's not a comfortable situation either when, you know, you were looking at people in various stages of leprosy. And so, you know, just not a good situation at all. And so the Jew would look and they would say, well, okay, this person is unclean. God in Leviticus 11 says, don't eat these particular animals. These animals are unclean. And we looked at that last week, what they were allowed to eat, what they were not allowed to eat. And these things persisted for 1,500 years, from the time Moses gave this law until really, actually it was after Jesus died. And let's go to Acts chapter 10. When did this law ultimately have its end? And we go to Acts chapter 10, and notice with me here. Acts 10. Okay. And verse 9, Acts 10:9. So Peter he's in Joppa here. There we go. Peter's in Joppa. That's on the coast. It's kind of south. I think it's called Haifa today, if I'm not mistaken. On the law, as they went on their journey, drew nigh to the city, Peter went upon the housetop to pray about the 6th hour. So what time of the day is it now? Noon. Noon is the 6th hour. So noon. Well, guess what? Noon is hour, and everybody else is what time? Lunchtime. Everybody eats lunch at noon. Everybody. If you don't, then I just don't know what to say about it. You're not human. No. See, I'm so cute. I skip lunch like every year. So. Okay. Acts 10, verse 10. And so it's the 6th hour, it's noon, and so at noon you're hungry. And he became very hungry, and he would have eaten. But while they made ready, he fell into a trance. That is, Peter fell into a trance. And Peter saw heaven open, and a certain vessel descended unto him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners and let down to the earth. Okay, put your finger right there. Is this a sheet? Is this a literal sheet? No. It's not a literal sheet. How do you know that? He's in a trance, that's true. But this is figurative, as it were. Okay? So these things are not literal. He's not literally doing these things. But is Peter seeing these things? Yes. So this is what Peter is seeing, but it's a trance. You can call it a vision, a dream, or whatever. Aren't you glad your dreams aren't real sometimes? Other times you wish they were. Okay. But they're not. That's the essence here. This didn't literally happen. It's in Peter's mind. So God is in Peter's head, if you will. Okay? And so this sheet comes down. What's in the sheet, verse 12? Wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, wild beasts, creeping things, fowls of the air. Can you imagine? There might have been owls and eagles and other raptor birds that are part of this. Pigs are in this sheet. Oh yes, little pigs running around. That's good. And there came a voice to him, and he's still in the trance, verse 13. And the voice says, "Rise, Peter, kill and eat." Now, Peter knew who this voice was because he addressed him, did he not? Verse 14. And Peter said, what? Not so, Lord. He knew who this voice was. He did not misunderstand who the authority was. And so he said, not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. Why not, Peter? Because Peter grew up under what tradition?
The old law.
The old law, that's right. He was a Jew. And so, as a Jew, you get used to life in a certain, living it in a certain way. And so he had never eaten any of these animals that were in this sheep, because the law said don't do it. Was Peter a faithful Jew, by the way? You better believe he was. He was faithful. And that was a good thing, wasn't it? That's not a bad thing. Quite the opposite. Would he have been selected to be an apostle if he was an unfaithful Jew? That wouldn't even make any sense, would it? Here's the thing, is that the faithful Jews in the first century had a lot of problems. And you can imagine why. Here is a slice, if you will, of the difficulty that many Jews had of leaving Judaism and coming into Christianity. They had a difficulty, and it had to do with the law. The law said, all the way back in Leviticus 11, don't eat these. Don't eat these animals, they're unclean. And if you eat these animals, then you can't participate in any of the feasts. You can't participate with your brothers and sisters in worship and in sacrifices and things like that. Well, that mentality gets ingrained in you. And we see Peter's honest answer. No, Lord, I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. Well, God had to reiterate this. He had to repeat it. The voice spake to him again the second time. What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common. This was done twice. So a third time. So God says, rise, Peter, kill and eat. Can't do that. I've never eaten anything unclean. Peter, I've cleansed these things. I'm now calling them all clean. You can eat any animal. You can eat any foods that you would like. Everything is clean. If I've made it, you can eat it. No, Lord, I can't do it. Peter, here's the third time. Now, verse 17. Now, while Peter doubted in himself what this vision which he had seen should mean, behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house and stood before the gate. Now, that's interesting. Peter knew that this had a deeper meaning, not just rise, kill, and eat. Now I can, eat these unclean food. But from this point, it was clear that the old law and what's the word I'm looking for there? The restrictions that are imposed in the old law are no longer imposed. Okay? Here's a sacrifice. No more sacrifices. Well, see, now Peter's used to that. Because remember, faithful Jew, had he been offering animal sacrifices all of his life? Animal sacrifice, Peter? Yeah, the answer is yes. Yes. Remember, he's a faithful Jew. Before Jesus, animal sacrifices for sin, fully in place. But after Jesus died, was there any more need for animal sacrifice? No need for sacrifices anymore. Peter got used to that. But there were still some holdovers of the old law. That because the old law isn't just about salvation. The old law is about a way of living. That's why we call it, sometimes I call this, the Jewish economy. Because it is a way of life. It's how they dealt with the outside world. It's how they dealt with themselves. It's how they dealt with themselves as individuals. It's how they approached God. The attitude that they needed to have toward God and toward their fellow man and to themselves. Now, when that law is put aside, and is no longer valid, you can imagine in the first century how unsteady that must have felt, spiritually speaking, for Peter and those other former Jews. That must have been very unsettling. That's why we have the book of Galatians. That's why we have the book of Hebrews, to help those Jewish Christians fully come out of Judaism into Christ. So when we read our New Testament, beginning in September, when we read our New Testaments, we are reading a book to a people who have been God's people all along, but now, since the sacrifice has changed, a lot of other things have changed too. But has everything changed? Has absolutely everything changed? No, not everything. Because still wrong to murder, is it not? Still wrong to murder. It's still wrong to lie. It's still wrong to cheat others. It's still wrong to take advantage of others. It's still wrong to not keep your word. So there's still many things that those principles we see in the old law, they still remain today. But it's because we see those things in the new law that we follow after them. Eating meat today that was not sanctioned in the old law is okay today. That's why, how many times, especially down here in the South, if you have a big to-do, 9 times out of 10, what's the meal going to be? It's going to be barbecue. And I'm not talking about, Ricardo, I love you. I love you. I love you. I just want you to know before I say this that I love you. But barbecue is pork-centric, not beef-centric, okay? You know Ricardo's from El Paso. And he's been down here too long, so he knows. Real barbecue is pork roast. If I have a side of brisket, though, that's all right, too. Okay. But, say again, it costs more. That's true, too. That's true. And we want to keep Chad in business, by the way. You know, he works for Hogslack, and so that's a pork. It's like a pig pen. Actually, the pig pen is what he does for a living. So, next time you see Chad, hey, pig pen. No, don't do that. No, don't do that. Don't do that.
I'm going to tell him you said.
See, I did. I was coming. Boy, I tell you what. It's
Tell us
rough.
to call you a pig pen.
Let me tell you, it's rough when you're, the way you earn your living is by speaking, especially me, because most of the time, I eat soul. And that's my main thing. This kind of soul. Anyway, not the fish, I wish. But you know, down here, we eat pulled pork. We just did. Does your conscience say that you shouldn't eat pulled pork? Does your conscience tell you that? Yours does? Mine does not. Oh, you do the brisket. Well, you're from Ohio too, so. But no, you know, that doesn't bother me. Do you eat ham? Oh, you don't eat pork at all? That's interesting. Why not?
It upsets my stomach.
Oh, it's a physical
My body
thing.
says don't eat it.
Don't eat that. Well, if your body says don't eat it, then guess what?
I'm not eating it.
Don't eat it. Do not eat it. Oh yeah, no. Ask Brenda about hot dogs. Yeah, no. It doesn't matter, beef, hot dogs, the mixed up hot, no, he just can't do it. His body says don't eat that. Yeah, so, there you go. And my wife says no gluten.
Yeah.
I'm the only normal one in my family.
I think so she would disagree.
Yeah, he probably would. He probably would. Yeah. But our conscience doesn't get to us in those things. Peter's conscience got to him because he grew up in that. And now the laws change, and it takes some time to get used to that new law. Why do people want to go back to a law that they have never known is beyond me? You know, I can understand Peter having difficulty. Can you not understand that? I think you can. But I do not understand why someone today would want to go back to the old law. Especially those of us who are in the Western Hemisphere, because we are all what kind of people? Every single one of us. Well, I guess there might be a little bit of slice in New York, but by and large, all of us here are what? We're all Gentiles, folks. None of us have ever been Jews. Ever. Our line doesn't even trace back through Shem. We just never were there. The law was never for us. We were never under the old law. And why would you want to go back to a law that you were never under? I don't know. Well, it's in the Bible. Sigh. That's all I gotta say. It did take Peter, and I do also think it's very interesting that the Lord gave this to him how many times? 3 times. That is a lot. How many times does God have to say something? Once. And yet, you know, he loved Peter. The Lord loved Peter. As a matter of fact, the Lord loved Peter, but Peter loved the Lord too, didn't he? What did he say? He said, feed my sheep, didn't he? There in John chapter 21, Jesus and Peter were in an intimate situation. And Jesus said to Peter, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? He said unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He said unto him, feed my sheep. How many times did he say that? He said it 3 times. Verse 15 he said it. Verse 16 he said it. Verse 17 he said, I want you to feed my sheep. And he told him, he signified in verse 18 what kind of death he would die. And it would glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he said unto him, follow me. The Lord asks those whom he loves to follow him. The Lord loved Peter. And so he didn't just tell him one time, he told him 3 times. This is my will for you. This is my will from now on. That the things that I say are clean, they are all clean. And you can rise, kill, and eat anything. So the old way, the law of Moses, is no longer in effect. And so that breaks that clean and unclean situation as well. So that's not just a ceremonial thing, is it? That's not just a salvation sacrifice issue, is it? No, the whole old law is gone. None of it is valid for us as far as to obey today. Ricardo?
I was going to go back to what you said earlier. And as far as Jesus talking with him 3 times, Peter, first thing I noticed, if I recall correctly, it wasn't always feed my sheep. I think he said maybe at least one time that tend my sheep. And whether that's, I always wondered why he said it that way, but anyway.
I think that's probably a little bit of a translation situation there. So whether it's feed my sheep or tend my sheep, he's talking about the same thing. But yeah, so sometimes we can interchange words with that. Yeah, I would. wouldn't put too much into that. We,
Well, you gotta think about it, back then, they had trouble in transition with Christianity. And now you think about Christian these days, we have, all of them have trouble making changes towards Christianity.
right,
Like we get saved, leaving the old self, going to the new self. You know
absolutely.
what I'm saying? So, if you really look at it today, a lot of Christians are, they have trouble in changing their self and their attitudes to what God tells us to do.
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, whether it's, whether it's coming out of the world or coming out of denominationalism, many times people will come out of denominationalism and not put every denominational doctrine down. And they'll bring that right into the church. And so, sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes that's why you have a movement to have instruments in the Lord's worship. That's why you have a movement to have women to have expanded roles in leadership in the church. That's why you have the push to go more into the entertainment part and have church be more entertainment and do things that just are not authorized in the New Testament to do. It's because people are so used to, in the denominational world, doing things, that when they come into the Lord's church, well, this is what I'm used to, so let's just have it here too. No, you can't do that. So you're right. People, unfortunately, do have a difficult time transitioning from one to the other, even today. I'm really glad that you brought that up, because it's really a good point. Well, we don't have time this morning. I was about to go to Luke 17 and talk about the 10 lepers that were cleansed, and the one that came back and said, "Thank you." And Jesus asked, "Where are the 9? Where are the 9? And the one that came back, he was a Samaritan. He was a Samaritan. That's exactly right. So, let's be thankful when the Lord cleanses us of our sins, whether it is in the watery regular baptism, the initial time, or whether we are able to return to Him and our sins are clean again. Let's be thankful to the Lord that we have that opportunity and tell Him, thank you. All right, that's all our time this morning.